the microphone because I don't quite have the energy that Andre does because I caught a cold yesterday. And I'm telling you that to milk your sympathy so that if I get loopy or boring, you'll forgive me. Okay, so this past year we had 9 interns from Claremont in our offices. And it really made me reflect upon my own time here and my own experiences and how things have changed in the last 10 so years, how much they've stayed the same. But then it also kind of reminded me of what an extraordinarily privilege it was to have a Claremont education. During my time here, I experienced a lot of challenges. As someone who was raised on welfare, I'd never been to a place that had so much wealth. And having grown up in multicultural LA, it was a complete culture shock to come to a place that was so racially and culturally homogeneous. Yet despite these challenges, I don't regret my time here. After all, I was given incredible opportunities that even my friends at UCLA and other elite institutions could never imagine. I got to travel to Mexico and to Turkey as part of my education. I got to meet personally Ivan Illich and Edward Said, who are these 2 huge intellectual giants that, my friends who are PhD students have never even gotten anywhere near. And most of all, I think what was really profound was the amount of support that both faculty and staff gave to me. And these were people who just took it out of their personal time. It wasn't part of their job description. It wasn't required. It wasn't part of the classroom. It was simply because I wanted it, I needed it, and that was part of the Pitzer culture. But those experiences have made me not only really grateful for the time I spent here, but also instilled in me a sense of responsibility to open the doors to higher education for other low-income students of color. As an organization, SICA, which is where I work, we work with low-income youth and families in the Chinatown, Echo Park, and Lincoln Heights neighborhoods of Los Angeles. We provide mentorship, education, and leadership development among predominantly immigrant and refugee Asian youth. Just last month, we, with a great deal of assistance from the staff at the Asian American Resource Center over at Pomona College, as well as dozens of student volunteers from all 5 campuses, including Harvey Mudd and CMC, we brought 25 of our students for an overnight stay. They were given a financial aid workshop, tours of the different campuses, and a student panel on college life, which was really funny because they got caught up in the anxiety around having to do a senior thesis, as opposed to asking about things like, what's the party scene like, or whatever else we would imagine that, a bunch of high school students would be more interested in. But what was really, really satisfying about the whole experience was that at the end of the trip, all of them stated that they now felt that college was much more accessible to them, and that they had a clearer idea of what they personally needed to do to get into a school like Claremont. But at the same time, my heart sank, because as I surveyed the room and reflected upon the individual academic records of each and every one of the students there, I could tell that a number of them probably would never even qualify for a school like Pitzer, let alone be considered seriously for admission. For me, that was the defining moment, because at that point I realized that despite Pitzer's emphasis on diversity and social justice, that an education like mine in many ways only serves to reinforce our country's rigid social class structures. For the 2008 first-year class, Pitzer had only a 22% admit rate, and I've heard staff state with pride that the school is becoming more selective with each passing year. And I understand that as an alum, that really benefits me as an individual, but as a citizen of this country, it makes me kind of question, what does it mean for society when our institutions of higher learning are becoming more selective at the same time that our K-12 public education system is falling apart? I was taught to believe from an early age that in America, if you're smart and you work hard enough, you can accomplish anything, and that school and higher education is the pathway out of poverty. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily believe that anymore. I work in a community where the local schools have been described by Harvard University as dropout factories. According to the UCLA Institute for Democracy, Education, and Access, at Belmont High School, for every 100 students that entered as 9th graders in 2003, only 16 graduated 4 years later. Which means that Belmont High School, you're 3 times more likely to drop out than the state average. And what about college? Well, only 7 of those 100 would be considered eligible for college, which means they had completed their A to G requirements to get into Cal State or UC. Again, it doesn't mean that they're competitive enough to actually gain admission in an elite university like Pitzer. And this is all before the budget cuts. I don't know if any of you guys have been following the news and the disaster that is Los Angeles Unified School District. We have some students who go to Roybal Learning Center, which is the most expensive school ever built in this country. Really. And 65% of the teachers were given pink slips just last month. Just yesterday, the LA Times reported that the school district has voted to eliminate summer school, which means that a lot of the students I work with won't be able to graduate on time. But the purpose of my talk today is not to depress you, even though I already have, but really to inspire you and to move your ideas into action. So one of my students recently asked me what it is that I do for work every day. And I guess the short answer could be that I try to come up with solutions to problems in my community. Issues of poverty and its immediate side effects, violence, discrimination, low quality public education. These are huge, entrenched problems, and I certainly do not have the magic formula to solve them. But what I've come to realize, and I really attribute part of that to my time here at Pitzer, is that there isn't just one solution. Just as these problems have multiple side effects, we have to create multiple solutions. Currently, my organization is working on a multidisciplinary approach to these issues of poverty, poor health, and economic and environmental sustainability. We're working on the development of a multi-use, multi-site venture that will incorporate a community garden, a supermarket, and a teaching kitchen. The garden will serve as a space for families and community elders to come together and connect with and teach traditional farming methods to younger generations. Many of the elders in our community are refugees that are dealing with mental illness related to wartime trauma, and we believe that the garden can be a safe space where they can share their histories and experiences with a younger generation that's desperate to learn about their history and identity. But it's also a way to increase access to green space in one of the most polluted and park-poor neighborhoods in the city. The supermarket itself will sell produce from the garden, offering residents with access to affordable, locally grown, organic produce in an area that's sorely lacking in healthy food options, while simultaneously offering job training to low-income residents who are oftentimes put into sweatshop jobs. And these are going to be jobs where a lot of them pay living wages substantially higher than their current wages, and it's a growth industry that serves a community need. Lastly, the kitchen will teach nutrition and culturally relevant cooking classes to a neighborhood where 1 in 3 children are obese. We chose to include the kitchen because a lot of our students have told us that they're desperate for healthy cooking classes. Many of their parents work in jobs where they're required to work 12, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, just to make rent. So who cooks dinner for the family? Well, it's the 15-year-old who has never learned to cook and who the last time had a health class was in elementary school, and so therefore has no idea how to put together a well-balanced meal. But we also want the kitchen to be used as a space to provide an opportunity for people in the community. And this is a community where most people don't speak English, and you've got like 6 different languages spoken. But it's an opportunity to bring all these different people from all these different backgrounds together to share their culture and their histories through food. This is a complex project, as you can imagine, with a lot of different components: land use, job training, workforce development, nutrition, finance, commercial lending. And I'm definitely not an expert in any one of these areas, let alone all of them. But again, what my Pitzer education has taught me is not to be an expert in one particular area, but rather the ability to understand and move across multiple sectors, to think broadly and to think big. And I think that's what makes this project so exciting. It's the fact that we're bringing together all these different people from all these different backgrounds into one place on one project. Chefs, gardeners, public health experts, transactional law attorneys, urban planners, labor force researchers, city hall, resident real estate experts, bankers. We even have a priest involved. Not for any particular religious reason, it was just more a happy convergence of common interest and shared resources. And if any of you guys have any expertise in how to run a small business, or how to run a capital campaign to raise millions of dollars, or if you happen to have a few $1 million to give, come up to me afterwards, please. But more than anything, this project's taught me is about moving an idea into action are 3 primary things. First, think big. We will never ever be able to solve all the problems of society if we think too small. And then to steal a quote from someone, if you think big and fail, it's a lot easier to explain than if you think small and fail. Okay, number 2, ask anyone and everyone for help. Most people who start up new projects oftentimes only ask their closest friends and family. The problem with this idea is that you'll never get past the startup phase, because what happens is that most time people surround themselves with people who are exactly like them. And so then after a while you start running out of ideas. But then also, if you ask everyone and anyone for help, you'll never know who you'll meet that can give you not only exactly what you want, but more importantly, what you didn't even know you needed in the first place. And oftentimes this isn't just expertise in a particular field or financial resources, but it's an access to like a broader social network. So I'll give you an example of something that happened last week actually. So one of my friends is a lawyer, and I was explaining to her the project, and she was really excited about it, but she apologized profusely that she didn't have anything that she thought could be of use, you know, in terms of her background, her expertise, her knowledge. But then she thought about, well, I have a little brother who just moved to LA, and I think he should get involved with some stuff, you know, because he's not really doing anything. And, you know, that doesn't sound too terribly promising, right? Like some random person who is bored. Turns out he's really passionate about food and healthy cooking, and has tapped a pool of chefs to provide free cooking classes and their professional services for fundraising events, and has offered to turn over his network to us. How perfect is that? Okay. Number 3, make sure that you're well grounded in the work that you do. And what I mean by that is that I've seen many passionate individuals start up projects that ended up having little to no relevance to the communities that they wanted to work in. At best, this becomes a waste of one person's time, but at worst, it diverts much needed resources and attention away from more pressing issues. Just to remind you all that the purpose of my talk today was to really inspire all of you as alums to mobilize for a common cause. And I'm certain that everyone in this room has different skills, interests, expertise, backgrounds, but what we do all share is this extraordinary privilege of a Pitzer education. And what that means is that we've all been taught to think big, to think broad, and that we have a social responsibility to give back to what was so generously, excuse me, getting a little sick again, so generously given to us. So no matter what you do and how much you have or who you are, I really challenge everyone in this room to think creatively about what you personally can do to create a better community and a better world.